Hey everyone, my name is Barak. I'm the Student Ministry Director at the Westminster campus. So excited to be with you all today. Today we get to look in the book of John, specifically at John 9, looking at one of the miraculous signs that Jesus performed in the book of John. And in this book, Jesus performed 7 signs, and I think this is the 5th one in John 9. It's where he and his disciples came across this man who was born blind. And the disciples ask, okay, who sinned? This man or his parents, or who sinned? The disciples, they had this thinking, and many Jews at the time had this black and white thinking where it was if someone sinned and they had some sort of bad thing happen to them, it was because of that sin. Or if something bad happened, it was because they did something wrong, or their parents did something wrong, or something along those lines. It was a very much reap what you sow thought. And Jesus flipped that thinking on its head. He said, well, actually, no one sinned. That is not the reason for this man's suffering. But that does not mean the suffering will not be used for good, for the glory of God. And so he performs this miracle where he restores the sight of this blind man. He puts some mud on his eyes, tells him to go wash in a pool, and that's all awesome. But this all happens on a Sabbath. And so the Pharisees, a lot of them got really upset with Jesus for performing a sign, for working on a Sabbath. And so they investigated and they were trying to figure out, okay, what happened here? Was this Jesus? What happened? Is this guy sent from God? We don't know. And so they asked the guy who was born blind, hey, did you receive your sight from Jesus? And he's like, yeah, I did. And then they were like, well, we're not sure if you're really the guy. So we're gonna ask your parents. And this is what his parents said. We know he is our son, the parents answered. We know he was born blind, but how he can now see or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age, he will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That's why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So this guy's parents is who I kind of want to focus on here because their son was a part of their story. And because he was blind and because people thought, okay, well, because he's blind, someone sinned, people may have thought that they sinned as parents. And so they might have been dealing with shame, and they were probably afraid of getting cast out or put away from being able to connect with God, being in the synagogue. And so they let that fear not let them own the part of their story where their son was healed. They didn't want to touch that. They were afraid of owning that part of their story. And that's kind of what I want to focus on. I think it can be a little bit different for all of us why we might be afraid to own part of our story. But we want to encourage all of us to own our stories and what God is doing in our lives. Maybe we are afraid because it will make us look bad, or it will be embarrassing to own part of our story. Or maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum, you feel like a part of your story, it just doesn't really matter, or maybe your whole story, you don't really feel like it matters all that much, like no one's really gonna connect with it, like it's not that amazing. Whatever the reason is for our fear for owning our story, I want us to put that aside and own our story, because God wants to do something really incredible through our stories. When we tell our stories, people's lives are changed. The man born blind, he told his story and people's lives were changed, but his parents were afraid to own it. And so I want to encourage us to try to own our story like the man who was born blind, and not like his parents. So today, that is my encouragement for you. Own your story because God wants to use it. That's all I have. Have a great one. Bye, everyone.